Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Simon. Opener and title track of their 2024 album, it's a story of a tribesman in prehistoric times and in a greater sense about choices, changes, and relationships in human life. We're looking at the group IOTUNN. The track in particular is Kinship Elegiac from the Kinship album. Let's dive in, see what IOTUNN is bringing to the table today.
I've known you so long, and never saw cause for alarm. Recall our childhood song, an oath to never lay down arms. I feel a coming end.
I'm really digging the softness to this, but knowing that it's IOTUNN,
I see through it all. Now would you know if I was gone? An epoch of brothers dissolves. To leave you is a sin. For my own story forced to begin. I see you here, but you're so far away, so far.
I like how there's still a bit of tenderness despite the weightier sounds coming in. And it's not even just that, there's also a temporal slowness to it too. It might be the same tempo, but there's less notes being played, so it feels slower. Yeah, so we have our eighth notes on the hi-hat over here. I'm pretty sure that's close to the speed the guitar was playing, so we might not have actually changed tempo at all.
Inspires blind control.
And I think on the topic of tempo too, we're still in the same tempo, the same speed. We just continue to increase the amount of notes that we're playing per bar. It makes it sound faster. But that core pulse is consistent. We have a small tempo increase here. I felt it coming into this section. The drums are very powerful in this moment too. They've been consistently a very present part of the song. Really interesting accent patterns that the drummer has toyed with up until this point, but really leaning into here. A really good push and pull through all of this. The pacing is well done, consistently altering energy levels, sometimes with volume, with layering, with speed, with sonic intensity. Yeah, dude, that's an interesting tone. hanging on to the emotive delivery on this solo here. Yeah, okay, here we go. Beautiful rundown. Drummer creating a lot of friction there that I don't know about it. So shifting back to the faster guitar playing with the much stripped down drumming. Interesting combination here, pushing towards to the outro of the track. Dang, muted that whole time. All right, well, we'll just kick this first analysis segment off then with what I was talking about. I really like that big moment at the end coming into the outro, especially with the vocalist choosing to stick with the clean vocals. I think pushing into the growls just would have lost impact that the belted cleans had. I could have seen pushing into a distorted clean maybe would have worked too. Maybe a fry. Even my penchant for enjoying fry screams, I think it would not have been the right move there. The belted clean is just, it brings the power and the intensity, but retains the humanity to the tone. Yeah, dude, solid end there. I also was talking about reducing the song to just the acoustic instrumentation there in those final moments, and I thought that was a great way to have a really sharp shift from that immense peak of the track into the final moments. it diminishes all of the energy, the gusto of it. It kind of feels like the wind getting knocked out of you, and I wonder if that's what's going on there. Feels like a quick, immediate defeat and just kind of losing all steam you had. But it works, and I think it's a very sharp return to the general vibe of the song, but with the loneliness of it. And I think that's what I want to bring up first is the emotional atmosphere of this. It's a somber track from start to finish. It really doesn't matter what kind of instrumentation we're looking at, whether it's acoustic instruments, light, just a couple of instruments, or densely layered with distorted electric guitars and growling. There isn't any part of this track that I think deviates too far from a somber melancholy. That harmonic element, the chord progressions of this track are consistently pushing in that direction. We might increase the intensity of that feeling with the aggressive vocals, with the growling, with the distorted guitars, with the layers and size and production of it all. But when you listen to the chords, it's so sad from moment to moment. It's not an aggressive metal track. Sure. I mean, that's the group of sounds they use. There's a lot of aggression to the way the drums are produced, to the distorted guitars, to the growling, even to the punchiness of the bass. But despite that surface level timbre, what sits underneath is something incredibly vulnerable for 14 minutes straight. And I really appreciate that. I mean, it's one of the things that I've brought up in past metal groups is that we might have a more emotionally interesting intro, or maybe a lull in the middle of a track, or the final moments of a song. But that whenever we get into the metal, the harmonic element shifts to something more metallic too. Power chords, tritones, more aggressive sounding progressions. It kind of ditches any of the softness and tenderness that we might see in these lighter moments. And a lot of what I hear in metal, even progressive metal, even some of the most well-regarded progressive metal writers, is almost a clear sticking to combinations of sounds that make sense. You have aggressive chords with aggressive instruments. You can have lighter, tenderer chords with lighter, tenderer instruments, but you very rarely mix the two, at least not in this way. Vulnerability is something we've heard in metal before, but not like this. It's very rare for me to describe growling and heavy distorted guitars and massive production as tender, and yet so much of this track is. I really appreciate that element of it, and I think the one thing that I love about it in this sense, especially given all of the different ways that we manipulate the sound in this track, is that it kind of gives vulnerability a plethora of, I don't know what you would call it, sounds to ascribe to it. Most of the time, vulnerability is a lack of layers. It's a more emotional or somber atmosphere. When you look at the harmony, it's lighter tones. You know, when you want to be, big and have bravado, that's when you belt out notes. That's when you play loud music. And when you want to be vulnerable, you lighten things up, move a little bit to the mixed head and chest voice, bring in a lot of air underneath it, and quiet things down. Because vulnerability is frequently tied with isolation. You can be vulnerable by yourself, but when you're with others, you can't. I don't know how much of this is just metal being metal, or metal being a male-dominated genre for so long, and men not being able to express their feelings in public and stuff like this. I mean, there's a lot of things that can tie into it, but When I think of vulnerability in metal, it's just the vocals, maybe the vocals and a clean electric guitar, maybe an acoustic guitar. It's smallness. You can be vulnerable alone, but not in a large group. And I love how this track doesn't follow that convention. There's vulnerability all throughout. In fact, I still think that final belted note is incredibly emotive. It is a baring of the soul, an opening of the heart. It is at the most bombastic moment of the track, the largest, the most intense. I'm a real big fan of what this track is doing emotionally, and it's not even just the vocals, it's not even just the chord progressions. I mean, listen to the guitar solo. That entire thing is filled with a bluesy weepiness in the way that the notes are bent and held onto and kind of moves, like smoothly moved into and then slurred out of. The notes aren't very sharp and direct. They're loose. They're messy. Yeah, dude, every bit of this, beautiful. And I love it. I'm also seeing right here on Rate Your Music that this was album 104 for 2024. I don't normally see metal that high up on the Rate Your Music charts. So this must be something special. And I've already heard 1/6 of this. This is a 14-minute song, and the album's only 68 minutes long. It's just a pretty big chunk of what the album is. Kind of figure I should just finish it, right? I don't know. That's way off topic, but it's a lot of praise, I think, for this track, and I have a lot of praise for it too. There's rhythmic complexity all over the place. Now this is a very riff heavy song. We do bring back riffs from early in the track into later. For the most part, I don't have a strong idea of structure to this. It just felt like we kept evolving, and sometimes I'd be like, hey, yeah, I remember that riff. We heard that sometime in the past. But it just feels like it's a constant linear evolution for the most part, with a few callbacks here and there. It'll be interesting to get into the lyrics and see if there is a lyrical structure, maybe a verse chorus idea going on in this track, but I don't know, even from that perspective, I don't know that I heard verses and choruses in here. Just felt like a constant progression of an idea. The drum work, though, dude, this stuff's crazy. There's so many strange passages in here that at the beginning were interesting. Really cool counterpoint, not counter, what would you like, polyrhythm. God, I don't know. I blanked out on that word. The drummer loves to introduce polyrhythm, particularly in drum fills, but they also like to interject odd phrasing, odd accent patterns within the general flow. In fact, right at the beginning, the first time that we get some strong drum work that isn't just accents on 2 and 4, which we did hear a couple of times and is what we return to at the end of the track, building into that final plateau. So there are times when the drummer says, all right, I'm backing off. I'm going to let everything else take the lead a little bit so I can build into something. And we did begin the track off with this very simple, just 2 and 4 accent pattern. But when we got into the first main point where the drums actually are contributing something of interest, we get 8 beats, pretty straightforward, 8 beats that are pretty straightforward, and then the next 16, the back half of this pattern, are wonky. I could not repeat them back to you rhythmically. I'd have to listen to it a couple more times. The accent pattern was just very strange and constantly clashed with the general pulse and cadence that the vocals, bass, guitar, occasional violin were presenting to the track. Like, you can follow a general flow, and then the drummer is just hitting all of these weird offbeat accents and bringing in odd cadences, and sometimes even polyrhythm, playing a completely different set of rhythmic ideas against the core. It was kind of neat here at the beginning, and I wonder if there is this general idea of friction, clashing ideas presented in the lyrics. Um, what was the context on this? Story of tribesmen in prehistoric times and a greater sense about choice, changes, and relationships. So yeah, there might be an element of clashing ideals that are going to show up in the lyrical side of things. I do find it interesting that it is consistently the drums that decide to create friction against everyone else purely on a rhythmic side of things. Because when I think about the chord progressions, pretty straightforward all the way through. And I think about melodies, vocals, they don't really have beef with anyone. They're very nicely placed in the mix. They worked well with the guitars and the bass. When I think of the guitar solo, it's also nicely paced, good accent patterns. Everything feels like it grooves well with its environment. It's the drummer who's consistently just like, I'm going to do something a little different right here. Y'all do what you want. And things are going to get weird for a second, but I have what I want to do here. And it's a mixed bag, I think. It starts off interesting. There's a couple of places where I think it's a bit rough. The final quarter of the guitar solo, the drums just completely upend the song. There's not a lot anchoring it down at that moment, and the drums are really the glue holding everything together. And then they cause this friction. They fight against what the guitars are doing. The guitars aren't in a place for stability. They're doing this melodic, emotional bearing of the soul. They're not foundational work right here. We really only have a chord progression, which doesn't have a lot of rhythmic information to it, and then the bass, which isn't strong enough to fight what the drums are doing right here. And the song really felt like it was going to fall apart for a moment and just hangs on by a thread. The guitarist wraps things up, finishes its solo, and we get into the next section. But the drums were so close at just destroying everything that the song had built up to that point. And artistically, very cool. Musically, it lost me. It really did. It was a moment I got pulled out of the song and wondered what was happening. And I got pulled out of that space where I was just like one with the song for a moment, just like really grooving with it, loving what the guitar's doing, feeling it. And then I got pulled out of that feeling moment and got really put into a thinking moment. What's going on here? I don't know. It was distracting, I think, is what I'm saying here. And there was one fill, particularly towards the end of the track, I think it was within the final 2 minutes during the build-up, that I thought also was a bit distracting. And it sucks because I think that the drum idea itself is very cool. I mean, whatever polyrhythm they're working with is complex. And there's a lot of skill that goes into this and trying to find a complex polyrhythm that gels wellish enough with the 4/4 groove that everyone else is laying down. It's tough, and trying to balance these ideas is tough. And I think that there's a lot of really neat ideas on display. It's just the execution sometimes misses the mark. On the flip side, though, for a lot of praise, there was a moment right before the guitar solo, I believe. This was a long song, so it was around the guitar solo, when we entered into something that felt like it was both 7. Actually, you know what it was? It might have been alternating 7 and 9, but it wasn't perfectly. Maybe it was like 7/9 and then 9/7. The phrasing was difficult to follow along with. There was also polyrhythmic ideas going on. And if you add up 7 and 9, you get 16, which is divisible by 4. So this whole thing might have been in 4/4, which means we also have polymeter here. And the possibility of layering polymeter against polyrhythm and an ever-shifting phrasing idea too, it created something that was really complex, but I think did work phenomenally. The whole section grooved great, despite the fact that I was kind of lost rhythmically on the whole thing. And Yeah, I mean that's one of those sections that sounds like magic, and I want to dig into it to know how it works, to get the peek behind the curtain on that one, not to see why there were problems, but just kind of be educated here. This was something I would not be able to write, and I would love to see the inner workings of it and kind of try to adapt it into my writing there. So I just wanted to balance that out because I ragged on some of the drum fills and ideas, but I mean, there's times when it just really clicks, and that was one of them. Absolutely love that moment. Um, this song though is expertly paced, and I think this is going to be the last topic I have here. There really isn't a moment where I feel like it doesn't have natural fluidity to it. From the acoustic intro into the rising guitars, starting out softer. As I mentioned, the drums come in basically with just a 2 and 4 idea. We get a small adaptation of some of the earlier ideas on the acoustic instrumentation on the electric guitars here, and just a general ramping up of ideas. It's really well done. It feels like a natural progression despite drastically different ideas. I mean, emotionally, yeah, the chords are the same, but atmosphere, sonic palette, textures, this is all very different. It's large, the production on it's a different feel, and yet it feels like a natural progression. We got here in a way that feels right. It feels connected. Every part of this journey feels right. No one part of it really feels disconnected. When the vocals pass on melodic duty to the guitar riffs, when the guitar riffs become guitar solos, all these moments feel right. And it's not just the sonic idea either. There's a lot of contrast and dynamic work in volume, in size, in layering, in emotional expansion too. The chord progression gives us our core, give us our core, our home emotional feel. It's somber because of the chord progression, but the notes that the melodies choose to play on top of that, the timbres of these instruments that are playing the melodies, these are also going to evoke different ideas as well. And it allows the emotional weight to subtly shift in different directions across the course of this. And it gives it a very strong, almost cinematic narrative feeling to this track where the general gist is the same throughout. There's really not a lot of change to that, but it never feels stagnant either. It always feels like it's exploring something a little bit different. We have tempo changes here and there. Sometimes we'll speed things up a little bit. Sometimes we'll slow it down. Maybe we'll keep the same tempo and play half as many notes or twice as many notes to give us this feeling of movement. It's wild how you can just close your eyes and be in this song and then it's over. This isn't a track that I think draws a lot of attention to its length. It doesn't feel like it is a lot of ideas, and it also isn't too fatiguing to listen to. Sometimes it's the length that does that. 14 minutes is a lot of time to dedicate to just sound. I think it's really impressive when bands can put that together and it not feel like 14 minutes, but it's also a very progressive track. There's a lot of ideas going on in it, but it never really crosses a line to where it's too many, to where it becomes difficult to listen to, tiring, fatiguing to have all of these ideas played and crammed into your ear across the runtime. It, in a lot of ways, walks a very fine line, almost a perfect balance in how long we spend in sections, how sections expand into others, how many layers we have at any one time. And when we do hit these really high peaks, we back that off pretty far. Much like good writing, whether it's a book or a film, has rising and falling action to it. This does too, across so many different parameters. I mean, we have layers, we have volume, we have size, we have intensity, we have attack, we have emotional weight. There's so many ways that they keep this thing feeling flowing and fluid. It's it's masterfully done, I think, is what I'm getting at the end here as far as pacing and storytelling and just general keeping the interest of me as a listener. It's really impressive. It is not without its flaws. It has faults, it has blemishes, but honestly, they're all very easy to overlook given the incredible level that this is both composed at and then subsequently performed at. Yeah, it's just impressive. That's the word here. Let me hit some lyrics on this, see what's going on there. I'm not sure I understand all of the surface level story here, but there is a general consistent theme of loss. There's a loss of friends, a loss of innocence. There is a loss of naivety, which I guess kind of lines up with the innocence part. And there is general regret tinged in the choices made throughout this tale. But it is dense and rather long, and like I said, I'm there's something I'm missing here. Even the first stanza kind of throws me off a little bit. It says, I've known you for so long and never saw cause for alarm. Recall our childhood song, an oath to never lay down arms. Oh. See, for some reason, I read this as antagonizing, that these two people who were friends at one point says, I never saw cause for alarm. Now there's an issue. He says, our childhood song was an oath to never lay down arms. I thought there was clashing here, but I think it's for them to never stop fighting for what they wanted. I think that's what that line's stating. Because even at the very end, I'm going to spoil this a little bit. The final few lines are about feeling abandoned, that this friend ends up leaving our narrator. I thought it was because of this friction introduced at the beginning of the track, but I couldn't figure out what that childhood song was about. But I think it's about constantly fighting. He says, though, I feel an end coming. It's as if I see through everything. There's one part where his friend is like a choir supporting him in his actions, says, faster now, ride the wires, seek what lies beyond. Your words are like a choir. Cast a spear through the ceiling, leave that hand behind that pulls back on the dream. And basically says, just keep pushing forward. And our narrator says, that's what kept me going. Your words inspired me. He says, though, later on that there's a call to some woods. It says, in their depth there's a vague light leading, painting the ragged shapes of crooked beings that spring from odious groves. There's also a very strong linguistic element to this track too. The vocabulary is beautiful and varied, but can often hide a little bit of the intent. It says, upon my gathering of sun-faded blooms, I came upon a failed goddess, decrying her shame, lost that feeling of a world beyond today. Without heart to guide, I know you've nothing left to say. Upon my offering of wilted herb and moss, the deity sprang forth with spite and curse into the glade, dying. I had visions where that night had come to stay. I could be mistaken and see bright skies return one day. This is where I get a little lost. I'm not sure what this goddess is supposed to represent, so if there's any meaning to it being in the woods, or if that's just the narrative element. The original, that's the wrong button. There we go. Simon had mentioned that this is the story of tribesmen in prehistoric times, so maybe the woods is just a time-accurate place for things to happen in. It's not like he's going to meet a goddess in a skyscraper. Those aren't around yet. In the middle of a busy city. So he says, after this moment, though, the woods expel me. So he went in, saw a woman lying on the ground. He created a potion, a medicine of some sort. He said, I offered wilted herb and moss, and the deity springs forth, curses this entire area, and then he is expelled from the woods. What does all of this mean? What does it represent? This is the end of the story. Everything prior to this is very straightforward. We fought together for so long and we continued to fight together, and you were my support. You were the reason I continued to take up arms. And then this little micro tale of the failed goddess in the woods says, the woods expel me. On the edge stands the ghost of my bleeding, but I've planted my seed of objection to set us free. And this is where we come to the final stanza about being abandoned by this friend. It says, I've known you for so long, and I know that you never belonged. I've watched you never change, all alone with the same sad song. You've seen the coming end, in any case, seen through it all. I was blind to what you saw, caught in my last failing cry, lost in the night's howling wind and crashing shadows. You left me, pushed by the forces of your own abandonment. You left me. And I'm not sure how all of this fits together, but it certainly brings in, finally at this point, the general vibe of the track. This song is somber, it's vulnerable. Here at the end, somewhere in here is where the vocals hit a peak. Just really latching on to this feeling of being left behind by someone who meant so much to them. It's almost as if this tale is being regaled in the future, past this event, so that everything is a feeling that has been felt. You can feel, despite some of the moments not being somber in the tale, the music still implies that. The narrator is injecting these feelings into the track because they know how it's going to end, or injecting these feelings into the tale because they know how this tale ends. Yeah, that whole element is really well done, but like I said, I'm missing something in the surface level story here. I'm not sure what the entire goddess in the glade is supposed to represent, but generally speaking, everything still comes together very clearly. I'm just missing some of the more nuanced elements to it that probably add to the work as a whole. These are, however, just my thoughts on IOTUNN's Kinship Elegiac. What did you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own interpretation of this song, the music, or the lyrics, or both? Let me know. Put all of that, as well as anything else you'd like to add, into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here, you can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.